The cold night air bit into my skin the moment I stepped out of the cab. My suitcase wheels dragged over the cracked sidewalk, and all I could think about was hugging my daughter Lily. It had been a long business trip, one I only took because the promotion depended on it. I called every night, checked in during breaks, and made sure she had everything she needed. My parents had promised they'd keep her safe until I got back. But then, I saw her. Sitting there. On the concrete outside the door to my apartment. Her little arms were wrapped tightly around her backpack, her head leaning against the wall, half asleep, with tears drying on her cheeks. I froze. My heart slammed against my ribs. I dropped my bag and ran. Lily? Baby, what are you doing out here? I crouched in front of her. She blinked up, dazed, then burst into tears, throwing her arms around my neck. Mama, I was cold. They told me I had to wait out here. I felt my stomach twist into a knot so tight it made me nauseous. I looked up at the apartment door. My apartment. The one I worked 2 jobs to afford. The one I had paid off with late nights and sacrificed weekends. Then I heard it. Laughter. The door creaked open, and there she was, Melissa, my sister, standing barefoot in my living room, holding a glass of wine. Her 2 kids were sprawled out on my couch, watching cartoons. And sitting beside them? My parents. Smiling. Chatting. Comfortable. Like they belonged there. Emily, my mom said cheerfully, not even standing up. You're back early. I stood there in disbelief, holding Lily tight to my chest. My voice trembled. Why is my daughter outside? Why are you in my apartment? Melissa gave me a smug smile and said, oh come on, it's not a big deal. Don't create a drama, okay? Not a big deal. Not a big deal. My 10-year-old child, left outside alone in the cold night, like she was some delivery package they didn't feel like bringing in, and they were telling me not to make a scene? I couldn't breathe. Rage and heartbreak flooded my chest at the same time. But I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I just looked at them all. And then I quietly said, okay. I kissed Lily's forehead, picked up my suitcase, and turned around. My mom called after me, confused. Melissa snickered. But I didn't say another word. I walked out into the night with my daughter in my arms. And exactly 1 hour later, I returned. But I wasn't alone. I took Lily to a nearby diner, the only place open at that hour, and sat her in a booth with a blanket the waitress kindly gave us. She was still shivering, clutching her hot chocolate with both hands like it was the only warmth she had in the world. I kept my arm around her while dialing. My hands were shaking, not from the cold, but from the fury storming through my veins. Detective Harper? Yeah, it's Emily Coleman. I need your help, tonight. Detective Harper wasn't just a cop. She was an old friend from college. We'd lost touch over the years, but she owed me a favor, and tonight, I was cashing it in. By the time we got back to the apartment, I wasn't just with Harper, I had 2 uniformed officers with me. My parents had no idea what was coming. As we stood at the door, Lily looked up at me and whispered, "Are they going to jail?" I knelt down. "Maybe not tonight. But they're going to learn they can't treat you like nothing, sweetheart." Harper knocked sharply. The door opened and there was Melissa again, this time with messy hair and the same smug attitude. "Oh my God," she groaned, "you actually brought the cops? You've always been such a drama queen." Harper stepped forward. "Ma'am, this is an active investigation." "Step aside." "What investigation?" my father barked from inside. I walked in slowly behind Harper, Lily clinging to my coat. Child endangerment. Illegal occupancy. Trespassing. Theft. Take your pick. "You're out of your mind," my mother snapped, standing up from the couch like she still had some moral high ground to claim. "We're family. We were just helping Melissa out for a few days." "A few days?" I repeated, voice calm but razor sharp. "You kicked my daughter out of her own home. You didn't feed her. You didn't answer her calls. And all this while knowing where I was. Melissa rolled her eyes. She's 10. She'll live. That's when Harper pulled out the photos Lily had taken on my old phone, of her sleeping outside, of the front door locked, of the food Melissa had thrown in the trash when Lily tried to eat leftovers. My father's face started to lose color. We didn't know it was that bad. You knew exactly what you were doing, I said coldly. You just didn't care. You chose her and her kids over your own granddaughter. And why shouldn't we? My mom snapped. Melissa needs help. You've always managed on your own. That hit harder than I expected. There it was, the truth I'd always felt but never heard aloud. The reason they always bailed her out, gave her money, made excuses for her. Because I was strong enough to not need them. And Melissa? Melissa was the poor, helpless victim no matter what chaos she created. Harper turned to me. Do you want them removed tonight, or press charges first? I looked at Lily. Her face was pale, exhausted. But her eyes? They were waiting. Watching. Learning. I want them out of my home tonight, I said firmly. And we'll talk charges once my daughter sleeps safely in her bed. That night, after Harper and her team escorted my parents and Melissa out, along with her kids who didn't even understand why they were leaving, we finally had the apartment to ourselves. But the silence inside was far from peaceful. Lily walked around slowly, like she wasn't sure if it was still her home. She hesitated before sitting on the couch, then clutched a cushion tightly against her chest. I thought you weren't coming back, she whispered. Her words pierced deeper than any insult my parents had ever thrown at me. I knelt down in front of her. Sweetheart, I would never leave you. Never. I didn't know any of this was happening. She nodded, but tears slipped down her cheeks. Nana said you were too busy with your new job and forgot about me. Aunt Melissa said I was being spoiled and needed to learn to toughen up. I held her hand. You were brave. You were stronger than all of them. I am so proud of you. I tucked her into bed that night with extra blankets, every single light on in the apartment, just because she asked. I sat beside her until she fell asleep. Her breathing finally softened, but I knew the damage had already started. That night, I barely slept. I stared at the ceiling, replaying every memory. All the times I chose to forgive. All the times I let my parents treat me like the second one while Melissa, the golden child, lived off their support. Flashbacks hit hard, like when Melissa crashed my wedding reception drunk and ruined the cake, and my mom scolded me for making a scene about it. Or when she wrecked my first car during a joyride and Dad paid for the repairs, but took it out of my savings. And yet, when I became a single mom at 24 after Lily's father walked out on us, I was told, well, you made your bed. I never asked them for anything. I juggled jobs. Moved into this small apartment. Worked my way into a business firm. I wasn't wealthy, but I was stable. I had given Lily a loving home. And now they had almost broken her spirit, just like they'd always tried to do to me. I pulled out an old photo album that night, one I hadn't looked at in years. Pictures of me as a child, often alone in the frame. Melissa was always in the center, dressed up, praised, celebrated. I'd convinced myself over the years that maybe I was exaggerating it in my mind. But no. The proof was there. I had been the placeholder. The backup. And now they had extended that cycle to my daughter. Something snapped inside me. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about breaking a pattern, once and for all. I wouldn't let Lily grow up believing she was disposable. I wouldn't let her think being strong meant being ignored. The next morning, I made some calls. Legal calls. I hired a lawyer to draft a restraining order, one that kept Melissa and my parents away from my home and my daughter. I also started the paperwork to gain full, legal guardianship rights that couldn't be contested by grandparents, just in case they got any ideas later. Then I sent out a group message to the entire family, extended uncles, aunts, cousins. If you ever truly cared for me or Lily, know this, she was left out in the cold like trash while you all enabled Melissa's nonsense. Don't ever tell me again that family is everything. You showed us exactly what we mean to you. Some replied. Most didn't. A few even defended my parents, said I was overreacting. But I had stopped caring. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving. I was fighting back. And not with yelling or tears. With actions. With boundaries. With clarity. 1 week later, I stood outside a modest little office building tucked between two boutiques in the quiet part of town. It wasn't flashy, but inside was my greatest weapon, Harper, my best friend since college, and now one of the most feared real estate attorneys in the state. She leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, her red lipstick as sharp as her legal advice. Emily, what they did wasn't just immoral. It could have been criminal. Especially if Lily had been harmed in any way. I'm not after jail time, I said, gripping my coffee cup. But I want this to stick. I want them to realize I'm not the same girl they used to silence with guilt trips and fake apologies. Harper grinned. Then let's make it legal. Let's make it loud. Together, we crafted a plan not fueled by rage, but by facts. First, she filed an incident report regarding unauthorized occupancy. Since Melissa had moved into my apartment without consent and removed my daughter from the premises without guardianship, she'd technically committed trespassing and endangerment. Next, we pulled financial records. My parents had signed off on Melissa's stay, knowing full well I was out of town for business and hadn't authorized it. But the apartment lease was mine. Everything inside it, mine. Harper was able to put together a legal notice threatening a lawsuit if they tried to step foot in my building again. That wasn't all. I reached out to my HR department. Quietly. I explained the situation and requested a temporary work-from-home arrangement for the next few weeks. I didn't want to risk leaving Lily again, not while she was still scared at night. They understood. After all, loyalty at work meant nothing if you couldn't protect your child. But the real move? I called Melissa's ex-husband, Daniel. He was no angel, but he was a devoted father. He hadn't seen his kids in 6 months because Melissa had told the court he was unstable. I never got involved before, but now? Now I had proof she was crashing with them in my apartment, unannounced, with no legal right. I'm not saying this to stir things, I told him. But maybe it's time the court heard a different story. He thanked me quietly. I also sent one final package to my parents. Inside it was a copy of the restraining order, the photos of Lily sitting alone with her suitcase, and a handwritten note. You blessed this. You called it not a big deal. She's 10. She waited in the hallway for 6 hours before a neighbor brought her inside. If your idea of family includes abandoning a child for convenience, then I don't want to be part of yours. I didn't yell. I didn't show up at their door with fury. I gave them silence. Legal silence. It burned more than any fight. Because for people like them, who thrived on control, on drama, on being the center of the storm, being locked out of my life legally and emotionally was the one punishment they hadn't prepared for. And as I tucked Lily in one night, her little voice sleepy and warm, she whispered, "Mommy, I feel safe again." That was all I needed. But revenge wasn't over yet. Because the world needed to see who they really were. And I had just the stage to do it. 3 weeks later, the silence I had given them started to echo back at them, louder than any argument I could have screamed. Melissa received a court summons. Daniel had taken the proof I gave him straight to family court, and not only was her full custody order reopened, but she was also being investigated for endangering her kids. The photos of my daughter sitting outside with her backpack, because Melissa kicked her out to take over the apartment, were damning. And Harper had made sure they were included in the evidence file. I didn't even need to show up in court. The truth walked in before I did. Daniel got temporary shared custody within a week. And Melissa? She was ordered to vacate my apartment immediately. I didn't have to call the police, the court made it official. Harper also sent Melissa a cease and desist letter. If she ever tried to enter my apartment again or interfere with my daughter's safety, she'd be arrested for trespassing. A formal restraining order soon followed, keeping her 100 feet away from Lily and me. But the real moment of karma came the day Melissa showed up at my parents' house after being kicked out, bags in hand, kids crying, and my father, who once proudly called her his responsible one, opened the door and hesitated. He had seen the pictures too. He had read my letter. He had heard the silence. "Dad," she said, panicked. "You have to let us stay. Emily just threw us out." He looked at her with something I'd never seen before, doubt. "I didn't know she left Lily like that," he murmured. "Dad, come on. Don't be dramatic like her." But he didn't invite her in. He didn't hug her. Instead, he told her she could stay for one night, and that was it. Melissa stood there, stunned. This was the same man who once called me overly emotional when I cried at family dinners. Who said, "You need to be more like your sister." Now, he was turning her away. And the cherry on top? That week was Lily's 11th birthday. I planned a quiet gathering, just a few close friends, her favorite cupcakes, and music she liked. And the biggest surprise? A guest appearance from her favorite science teacher who had moved to another state but joined via Zoom just for her. As Lily blew out the candles, she whispered a wish. "I wish it could always be like this. Just you and me, safe." And it was. Because I made it so. Meanwhile, my parents were left to deal with the storm they had helped create. They tried calling me. First with excuses. Then with apologies. Then with guilt. I didn't pick up. Then, they tried to show up at my workplace, but security turned them away. I had already warned HR in advance. I was done explaining myself to people who thought a child's safety was not a big deal. Now, they were on the outside, looking in, and they didn't like the view. I heard later that Melissa had to move in with a friend in a cramped one-bedroom house. Her kids now split their time between her and Daniel, who had started documenting everything. Her fall wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. Poetic. Deserved. Because karma doesn't always come crashing down, it sometimes walks in slowly, hands folded, saying, "Remember what you did?" And now, they all remembered. It had been 2 months since that day, since I came home to betrayal, heartbreak, and silence. Now, the peace inside our apartment was something you could feel. No footsteps stomping, no loud voices echoing down the hall. Just me and Lily, in our own rhythm. I redecorated the apartment, not because I had to, but because I wanted to reclaim the space. The couch where Melissa had lounged around was replaced with a comfy L-shaped one Lily picked out. We painted the kitchen cabinets white and added a backsplash with tiny stars. Lily said it made it feel like our galaxy. One Friday evening, I was cooking dinner when she walked in from school, wearing a paper crown and holding a certificate. "Look, Mom. I won the Kindness Award." I knelt to hug her, my eyes stinging with tears. Not just because I was proud, but because in spite of everything, she had held on to her goodness. She hadn't let their cruelty define her. I'd started therapy too. Not just for the pain of that betrayal, but for years of being pushed to the side, invalidated, and told I was too much for feeling deeply. Turns out, feeling deeply was my strength, not my weakness. And the biggest change? I bought a house. Nothing massive, but it had a backyard with a tree perfect for building a treehouse. It was near Lily's school and had a cozy front porch with space for a swing. The day we moved in, Harper came by to help us unpack. She brought pizza, wine, and coloring books. "You did this," she smiled. "Not just the move, but choosing peace over chaos. That's not easy." I nodded, finally feeling the truth of it settle in my chest. Later that night, as Lily slept in her new room with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, I sat on the porch, sipping tea. The sky was dusky pink, and everything was quiet. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my mom. "I wish you'd let us visit. Things aren't the same anymore. Your sister, she's struggling. We just want to be a family again." I read the message twice. Once for the words. The second time for what wasn't said. There was no acknowledgement of what they'd allowed. No apology for leaving my child out on the street. Just guilt, disguised as longing. I didn't respond. Because healing meant knowing who to let back in, and who to leave at the door. Weeks later, I was invited to speak at Lily's school during Career Week. As I stood in front of her class, telling them about running my marketing firm and balancing work and motherhood, I saw her in the front row, beaming. Later, she ran up to me, wrapped her arms around my waist, and said, "Mom, you're my hero." I knelt, eye to eye. "No, sweetheart. You're my hero." And in that moment, everything made sense. They could keep their silence, their denial, their half-hearted guilt. I had built something better, not out of revenge, but out of love, boundaries, and bravery. I had found my voice in the quiet. And the last words I whispered that night as I tucked Lily in? "This is our forever." The day I first realized I didn't truly belong in my own family wasn't recent. It happened long before my business trip where that night Lily was left out in the cold. I was 12. My dad had promised to take me to the science fair. I had worked for weeks on a project about stars and constellations, staying up late with glue and glitter, tracing patterns and memorizing facts. He said he'd be there at 5 p.m. sharp. But 5 p.m. came and went. Then 6. Then 7. I stood by the door in the empty gym with my trifold board slowly tipping over, the janitor sweeping nearby, until finally, my mom called to say he had taken Melissa to an ice skating competition instead. She needed him more today, she said. It's not a big deal. It was always Melissa. Birthdays, holidays, even regular Tuesday dinners, it was as if I was the shadow in the family photo. Present but forgotten. As the years passed, I stopped asking for attention. I stopped waiting. I built my independence out of sheer survival, which, ironically, made them resent me more. "You always act like you're better than us," Melissa once snapped. But I wasn't trying to be better. I was just trying to matter. That's why Lily meant everything to me. I swore I'd never let her feel that invisible pain. I raised her to know her worth, to speak her truth, to never shrink herself just to be accepted. And it made them uncomfortable. "She's too outspoken," my mother once muttered. "Just like you." That flashback hit me hard one night as I tucked Lily in. She had asked me if Grandma and Grandpa would ever visit our new home. I told her gently, maybe one day. If they can learn how to treat people right. She paused, then nodded like she understood more than she should. Then she whispered, "It's okay, Mom. We're better without them." That night, I opened an old box in my closet. Inside were childhood pictures, my high school diploma, a few letters, and a faded photo of me at that science fair, alone beside my sparkling constellation board. I held it in my hands for a while, remembering the chill in that gymnasium. And then I smiled. Because that girl in the picture? She grew up. She became a mother, a fighter, a woman who wouldn't let history repeat itself. The past didn't define me anymore. But it sure as hell explained everything. And in understanding it, I forgave myself, for all the years I tried to make them proud, for the times I stayed silent, and for every piece of me that felt unworthy. The truth was no longer hidden. It was in every choice I made now. And that truth? It had set me free. When I returned to my apartment that night, with Officer Daniels by my side, everything was quiet. The kids were asleep in Lily's bed, my sister was curled up on the couch like she owned the place, and my parents were casually sipping coffee like it was their homecoming. But when they saw me walk in with a police officer, their faces dropped like bricks in a pond. My mother stood up immediately. "What is this, Olivia? Are you really calling the police on your own family?" I looked her in the eyes, calm, steady, and no longer that little girl begging for scraps of affection. "I didn't call the police," I said. "I called protection, for my daughter. You left her on the street. That's not just immoral, it's criminal." My sister scoffed. "Oh, come on. It was just an hour. She's 10. Kids survive worse." Officer Daniels stepped forward. "Ma'am, child abandonment is a serious charge. Especially when committed with malicious intent. You had no legal authority to occupy this apartment, and you left a minor unsupervised outside the building." My father's voice raised, trying to take back control. "Don't escalate things. You're just overreacting like you always do." I looked at him, finally seeing him for who he truly was. Not a protector. Not a guide. Just a man who had long ago decided which daughter mattered more. You made your choices, I said quietly. And now, I'm making mine. Officer Daniels turned to me. Do you want them formally charged? I took a breath. No, I said. I want them out. Tonight. My sister opened her mouth to protest, but Officer Daniels cut her off. If you refuse, we can book you for trespassing. And I assure you, those charges will stick. They left within 20 minutes. No goodbye. No apologies. Just dragging bags and bitter glances. As they walked out, Lily peeked from behind my leg. She looked at me and whispered, "Are they gone?" I knelt down and cupped her face. They're gone, baby. It's just you and me again. Just like it should be. She smiled, the kind of smile that wipes out every storm. That night, after Lily fell asleep safely in her bed, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by the window. The city lights twinkled below like stars in a jar. And I thought about that little girl from the science fair. I thought about every lonely birthday, every missed piano recital, every time I was told I was too much or too sensitive. And then I thought about now. I owned my business. I paid for this home. I raised a daughter who knew her worth. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I let justice speak for itself. That was the real revenge. Not a shouting match. Not a slap or a scream. But a quiet, powerful exit from the cycle. I picked up my phone and opened a new contact, Family Redefined. It had just one number, Lily's. We were enough. A few weeks later, Lily and I went to a lake house I rented, just for the two of us. We roasted marshmallows, told stories, and danced barefoot in the grass under the stars. She asked me, "Mom, are we going to be okay?" I kissed her forehead and said, "We already are." In that moment, I wasn't Olivia the forgotten daughter. I wasn't the sister pushed aside or the child left behind. I was a mother. I was a warrior. And I was free. And if any of them ever wondered how I turned out so strong, they'd never understand that they were the reason I had to. Because sometimes, the ones who break you, unknowingly build you into something unshakable.